I'd like to talk about consciousness, the hard problem, or the meta problem of consciousness. That's why are we conscious at all when we could just be aware? And it may seem like we already have an answer to the question, why are we conscious? In this video, I'm going to break down the differences between consciousness and awareness. Many people today feel that with science we can pretty much understand everything. As technology advances exponentially, it seems more and more that we can explain our world without having to rely on the supernatural. So for a while now, scientists have realized that understanding consciousness requires a clear distinction between the terms awareness and consciousness, because we understand awareness. Science can tell us a lot about the biomechanics of our awareness, but awareness is not consciousness. We have to use very concrete, specific terms if we want to approach this question scientifically, which is inherently difficult to do. In this video, I also want to talk about consciousness as an emergent property insofar as the ways it's not an emergent property or the ways it can't be. The difficulties that arise when we address this issue if we want to keep talking about consciousness in a scientific light, if we want to not have to resort to God. I'm going to approach this topic from as scientific of a perspective as is possible when talking about consciousness, and in doing so, we'll discover the kind of paradox at the center of this question and why it's damn near impossible to fully explain consciousness. Well, why it's currently impossible and looks like it might forever be impossible to explain consciousness with our current methods of science. If we don't acknowledge the functional differences between consciousness and awareness, then as many claim today, consciousness can be fully explained as emerging, as being an emergent property, like a hurricane or a traffic jam or life. Cars are not a traffic jam, but when arranged in a certain way, they produce one. Likewise, awareness, which is an emergent property like everything else, requires that there is stimuli that can be made aware of. To be aware of this 409 multi-surface cleaner, it has to be in my line of sight, or I have to have a brain complex enough to remember 409 exists even when I'm not looking at it. Awareness is in fact an emergent property. The property of perceiving and knowing that arises or emerges simply from the way our brains and bodies are built. Awareness is the rational result of evolution. Organisms able to react to a greater variety of environmental stimuli, of course, had greater reproductive success. We call a system aware if we can observe it reacting to varied stimuli with specific behavior. So, for example, if you poke a cat and it scratches you, you can assume that the cat is aware. It was aware of you poking it, and it reacted specifically. And depending on your level of awareness, you'll probably stop. But by this definition, pretty much everything is aware to some degree, everything that can react really at all. And I mean react in the broadest sense of that word. Supposedly then, things without brains, like plants and fungi, still react to their environment, even if they don't know why they're doing it. This also means that your computer is aware. Awareness is a property we apply an entity when we observe it exhibiting a certain behavior. Consciousness, on the other hand, is the experience of being. Okay, so first we're going to need to define what we're talking about when we're talking about consciousness. We're talking about phenomenal consciousness. In this context, the repercussions of ambiguity in our definitions of words like awareness and consciousness are larger than you might think. Both awareness and consciousness describe what happens when information is perceived. So what do we mean when we're talking about consciousness? Consciousness is you, divorced of your body and mind. Consciousness is your soul. It's yourself. It's the experience of being you. That's what phenomenal consciousness is. We say a system is phenomenally conscious when there is something it is like to be it. Awareness usually implies consciousness, but there's actually really no way to know any one or thing beyond yourself is conscious at all. Like in a dream, when we're dreaming, we're assuming that the other people in our dreams have minds of their own. However, when we wake up, we realize that's not the case. It could be the case that you right now watching this, your life could be a dream, and everyone you know could just be figments of your imagination. There's really no way to tell. I know it's a lonely thought, but as far as the way you live your life, the rules of the game are still the same. So all you know and all you can know is that you are conscious. You know this because you are consciously experiencing. In fact, there's a pretty good argument that that's really the only thing we can know. So if we're talking about consciousness as an emergent property, we are assuming it arises from the complex systems that make up our brains and bodies. That actually seems like a pretty reasonable way to look at it, to me and most people, most of the time. Unlike awareness, consciousness exists in the absence of all stimuli. It is not entirely correct to say that consciousness is an emergent property. A traffic jam is not the cars that compose it, but when you take those cars away, the traffic jam also disappears. A hurricane is not the clouds that compose it, but when you take the clouds away, the hurricane no longer exists. Take away your physical body, your thoughts and feelings, everything you can be aware of, and consciousness exists all the more. Another reason why consciousness can't just be an emergent property in the way we like to think about all other emergent properties, that anything emergent, which means any emergent property, so anything that's emergent must be recognized as such. Emergent properties, by definition, cannot be strictly tangible, which means that they are abstract to a degree. We don't realize pretty much everything in our life is abstract to a degree. We're not interacting with the literal atoms that make up everything. A traffic jam is called a traffic jam because we came up with that name and we decided to call it that. A hurricane is called a hurricane because we decided to call it that. A hurricane doesn't know it's a hurricane. The people and animals and plants and fungi on the ground know it's a hurricane. In the absence of an omniscience or a provable objective reality, another necessity of an emergent property is that it must be recognized at all, because it doesn't exist unto itself. Like a hurricane doesn't know it's a hurricane. A traffic jam doesn't know it's a traffic jam. It's a hurricane to us, it's a traffic jam to us. If consciousness is an emergent property, then it's the only emergent property capable of knowing itself. Then we must decide, is consciousness pure experience capable of experiencing itself? If so, then the answer to the question, why are we conscious at all, is simply, we are because we know ourselves to be. True, but not helpful. So either that, we are an emergent property capable of experiencing itself, the only emergent property, or the subjective experience that is our consciousness isn't actually subjective. And we are known to someone or something else in the same way that we are known to ourselves, if that makes any sense at all. So, God. I think that's a large part of the reason why God is and has been such a useful explanation. Because even if our ancestors never explored this meta problem of consciousness or this hard problem of consciousness like we're doing in this video and like more and more people are doing today, the understanding that we are more than simply matter that makes us up is innate and hard to shake. A lot of people, like myself to an extent, when you take this train of thought further and further, you can come to the conclusion consciousness, the experience of being, is an illusion. That you don't exist at all. And I'll illustrate this point with a thought experiment from the movie Inception. If I say, don't think about elephants, the thought of elephants occurs, inevitably. No matter what, thoughts experienced occur as a result of the natural world, just like everything else. The natural world includes the synapses in your brain exchanging neurotransmitters. Alright, that just about sums it up. Well, that doesn't. Far from it. But that's enough for today's video. It's my dream to make videos like this about topics that interest me, like pretty much all the sciences. What I want to do with this channel is take the stuff I know, boil it down, give it to you in the most candid way possible. If you liked the video and if you like the channel idea, go ahead and hit subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube won't for sure show you a new video I make anymore unless you hit that notification bell. Probably a lot of what I said, my explanations left something to be desired. If you're curious or have a question or flat out disagree with anything I've said, let me know. Do let me know. Do let me know in the comments below. It helps this channel grow, and even if it didn't, really, this is my passion. I love discussing this kind of stuff. I want to know if I'm wrong about something. I want to know where the holes in my logic are. So let me know. I'm planning on making multiple videos like this a week. So do stick around for those. All right, and that's it for now.